Both blues and rock and roll owe an enormous debt to Muddy Waters and his pioneering electric guitar work and songwriting. This is the untold truth of Muddy Waters, the father of Chicago blues. As documented in Robert Gordon's Can't Be Satisfied, The Life and Times of Muddy Waters' early years are shrouded in mystery, much of it self-created. Waters was sketchy on details in interviews, citing the year of his birth as 1915. He also told people that he was born in Rolling Fork in Sharkey County, Mississippi. In truth, Muddy Waters was born McKinley Morganfield on April 4, 1913 in Issaquena County, northwest of Rolling Fork, in a tiny community called Jugg's Corner. Although Rolling Fork was and is a small town, it was nonetheless a metropolis compared to a rural bend in the road like Jugg's Corner. Waters' father was Ollie Morganfield, an amiable, burly man who made his living as a mule skinner, hauling timber across the state to the sawmill in Vicksburg. Morganfield was also a talented musician known for livening Saturday fish fries by singing and playing the guitar. He was 21, a father, and recently separated from his wife when he met Muddy Waters' mother, Berta Grant, in the summer of 1912. Although the couple did not marry, their only son would be given his father's surname. According to Gordon, virtually nothing is known of Berta Grant. No records of either her birth or death exist, and she died shortly after giving birth to McKinley. The circumstances of her death are unknown. Young McKinley Morganfield would grow up in the care of his grandmother, 32-year-old Della Grant. Della Grant struggled raising her son and grandson on Cottonwood Plantation. Life as a sharecropper on a plantation in the early 20th century was barely a step above slavery. In exchange for a small plot of land and meager living quarters, a sharecropper was expected to work in the cotton fields from sunup to sundown. The landowner took half of the sharecropper's harvest and deducted his expenses for seed, tools, and livestock from what was left. Plantations functioned as privately owned towns, often with their own money, good only at the farm owner's store. Ultimately, the conditions on a plantation were contingent on the character of the owner. Some were good, some were bad. None were particularly fair. It was an especially hard life for a single woman raising two young boys. According to biographer Robert Gordon, Della Grant had packed up her boys and moved 80 miles north to Stoville Plantation near Clarksdale, Mississippi by 1920. Stoville's owner, Colonel Howard Stoville III, had a reputation for benevolence and generosity. Nevertheless, life remained hard for Della Grant. Little McKinley Morganfield's love of splashing in the murky and often dangerous waters around his grandmother's home earned him the childhood nickname Muddy. Stomping around in the dirty Delta water was one of the few pleasures for a child growing up on a plantation. Able-bodied children were required to work. After just 3 years of formal schooling, Muddy was forced to quit and go to work in the fields to help support his family.
Little kids, 10 years old out there working, on the farm.
Although work dominated Waters' life on Stoville Plantation, he discovered the joy of music at an early age. Della Grant made sure young Muddy attended church every Sunday. Worship was a refuge for Stoville's sharecroppers, and services were lively and filled with song. In the pews of Stoville's church, Waters discovered the power of rhythm and melody. However, it was music with distinctly different intent that really fired Muddy Waters' soul. Waters told Robert Palmer, author of Deep Blues, "The lady that lived across the field from us had a phonograph when I was a little bitty boy. She used to let us go over there all the time, and I played it night and day." Exposed to the recordings of such blues artists as Blind Lemon Jefferson, Tampa Red, and Memphis Minnie, Waters would develop a musical vocabulary and sophistication beyond that of other rural musicians. By the time Muddy Waters was a teen, music had become an all-consuming passion. When his grandmother bought her own phonograph, Waters scrounged every nickel he could find to buy records by his favorite blues artists. As detailed in Can't Be Satisfied, Waters pored over the recordings of Blind Lemon Jefferson, Charlie Patton, and Son House. At 14, Waters experienced a blues epiphany when he saw Son House play at a juke joint outside of Clarksdale. House's skill with a bottleneck slide inspired Waters to trade in his harmonica for a guitar. After some informal lessons, Waters finally bought his first guitar at 17. Waters recalled to Robert Palmer, "I sold the last horse we had, made about $15 for him, gave my grandmother $7.50, I kept $7.50 and paid about $2.50 for that guitar." Soon after buying his first guitar, Muddy Waters began playing all-night jukes around Clarksdale. Making up to $2.50 a night, Waters quickly saved up enough money to buy a new guitar, a $14 model ordered from the Sears and Roebuck catalog. From an early age, Muddy Waters knew he was meant for life beyond Stovall Plantation. Still, gig money wasn't steady, and Waters supplemented his income of 50 cents an hour from sharecropping with a number of odd and sometimes illegal jobs. As detailed in Can't Be Satisfied, Waters earned extra money as a fur trapper, selling the hides of mink, raccoons, and rabbits. Throughout his childhood, Waters earned money scrubbing bottles and selling them back to moonshiners. As a young adult, he learned to make and sell whiskey himself, an activity to which the owners of Stovall turned a blind eye. In the summer of 1941, Muddy Waters heard a rumor around Stovall that a white man was looking for him. In Waters' mind, that could mean just one thing: the authorities were onto him for bootlegging whiskey. However, Alan Lomax was no revenue agent. He was a 26-year-old ethnomusicologist on a mission from the Library of Congress to document the vanishing folk music of the American South. He had heard Waters was as good as the recently deceased bluesman Robert Johnson and wanted to record his music. Nevertheless, Waters still had his doubts about this strange white man. To establish trust, Lomax asked for some water and, to Waters' astonishment, shared it from the same cup from which he'd been drinking. In the segregated South, such an act was unthinkable. As documented in Can't Be Satisfied, Lomax set up his portable recording equipment on the porch of Waters' cabin, and with a toast of Muddy Waters' moonshine, all traces of distrust melted away. Lomax recorded 2 of Waters' songs that day, Country Blues and I Be's Troubled. Muddy Waters arrived in Chicago in 1943 with a suitcase and a guitar. He went to work as a truck driver and played house parties and small clubs at night. However, the Chicago music scene was not at all what he'd expected. Waters told Peter Guralnick, author of Feel Like Going Home, Portraits in Blues and Rock and Roll, blues was dying out. There was nothing happening. It was pretty ruggish, man. Soon after arriving in Chicago, Waters' uncle Joe Brandt gave him an electric guitar. To make his mark in the big city, Muddy Waters needed to be heard over the din of crowded bars and nightclubs, and the amplified instrument was just the thing. Although T-Bone Walker had used an electric guitar as early as the 1930s, Waters' use of the instrument through a crank distorting amplifier, coupled with his signature licks, transformed the instrument from mere accompaniment to the voice of Chicago blues.
I think I'm the man that set Chicago up for the real blues.
As detailed in Peter Guralnick's Feel Like Going Home, Muddy Waters' electrified sound gained him a loyal club following, and in 1945 he caught the attention of Columbia Records. He would record songs for the label, but they were never released. Waters' recording fortune soon changed when a talent scout from Aristocrat Records heard him. After several unsuccessful records, Waters had his first hit in 1950 with Rolling Stone. Aristocrat, rechristened Chess Records, would become the leading purveyor of blues music. Just prior to the release of Rolling Stone, Waters assembled his first band. In the highly competitive world of Chicago blues clubs, Waters' group was second to none. Waters, along with guitarist Jimmy Rogers and harmonica player Little Walter, who would both become successful solo blues artists in their own right, were feared and respected on the club circuit. Waters said in Peter Guralnick's Feel Like Going Home, "I'd say back in 47 or 48, Little Walter, Jimmy Rogers, and myself, we would go around looking for bands that were playing. We called ourselves the Headhunters, cause we'd go in and if we got a chance, we were gonna burn them." In 1954, Muddy Waters had his best year ever as a recording artist. With 3 singles in Billboard's R&B Top 10, including 2 of his biggest hits, Hoochie Coochie Man and I Just Want to Make Love to You, Waters had revolutionized blues music. Yet by 1956, blues sales were in rapid decline thanks largely to the advent of rock and roll and artists such as Chuck Berry, whom Waters had referred to Chess Records just a year before. As documented in Can't Be Satisfied, Muddy Waters soon found himself resorting to local gigs to make ends meet. Although blues was in decline in the United States, British audiences were hungry for its gritty authenticity. British jazz musician Chris Barber and his band were hooked on Delta and Chicago blues, and had managed to import real blues stars such as Sister Rosetta Tharpe, Sonny Terry, and Brownie McGhee for concerts in England, but landing Waters for a show was their holy grail. Expecting a rustic folk musician with an acoustic guitar, British audiences were totally unprepared for Waters' stinging electric blues when he arrived in 1958. Although some purists were turned off by Waters' wild, amplified Chicago blues, others were paying careful attention. Among this new wave of British blues devotees were Eric Clapton, Eric Burdon, and Mick Jagger, and many others who, inspired by Muddy Waters, would bring the blues back with a vengeance in the 1960s. As the 1960s unfolded, British bands like the Rolling Stones covered Waters' songs, opening his music up to a new generation of young fans. From the Animals to the Yardbirds, British blues became the sound of rock and roll in the 1960s, with loud electric guitars as its driving force. Although the emergence of rock had nearly ended his career, Muddy Waters' influence would mark its continuing evolution.
I feel like I did something for the music world.
However, an attempt to modernize and repackage Waters as a rock artist failed with the 1968 release of Electric Mud. The brainchild of Marshall Chess, son of Chess Records founder Leonard Chess, Electric Mud placed Waters and his Chicago blues in the midst of the late 60s heavy rock fuzz and psychedelic. Although Electric Mud initially sold well, it was panned by critics. No one was as hard on the experimental album as Waters himself, who said, "That Electric Mud record I did, that one was bad. But when it first came out, it started selling like wild, and then they started sending them back. They said, this can't be Muddy Waters with all this stuff going on, all this wow wow and fuzz tone." As detailed in Can't Be Satisfied, Muddy Waters appeared in what would be his last recorded performance on November 22, 1981. Taking the stage at Buddy Guy's Checkerboard Lounge, Waters was joined by the Rolling Stones, trading vocals with Mick Jagger on Hoochie Coochie Man. A frail-looking Waters nonetheless held his own with the worshipful English rocker. Shortly after the historic performance, Waters, a longtime sufferer of hypertension, collapsed. Diagnosed with cancer, he underwent surgery to remove part of his lung. Waving off chemotherapy, Waters' cancer went into remission, and he was well enough to take the stage again in late spring 1982. On June 30th, 1982, Waters surprised Eric Clapton on stage in Miami, joining him for a performance of Waters' classic Blow Wind Blow. It would be his final performance. Upon returning to his Chicago home, Waters began coughing up blood. His cancer was back, and it would worsen over the course of a year. On April 30th, 1983, just over 3 weeks after his 70th birthday, Muddy Waters died of cardiorespiratory arrest and carcinoma of the lungs. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more grunge videos about your favorite stuff are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.